Hello, what's up, and welcome to the Weekenders. This is the show where we talk about football, best football games of the weekend. Even though there's no football games going on, there is a lot of football content to talk about, and that is because we're a couple weeks away from the NFL draft. Super excited about that, and I had to, we last time on the show we talked about, how thrilling it was for the entire NFL that the Carolina Panthers have the number one pick. So I thought,
so thrilling.
So thrilling for the entire NFL world. So I thought I had to bring on a guest who knows not only the NFL and college football like, the back of your hand, but somebody who does radio in a city that has a team with the number 2 pick, the Houston Texans. Cody Stoots, welcome to the Weekenders. What's up? How you doing, man?
I'm doing fantastic. I'll keep waiting for that guest that knows the college football and NFL like the back of their hand. You going here anytime soon? When's that guy showing up?
Cody, man, thanks so much for coming on the show. I really, really appreciate it. For those of you that are not familiar, Cody Stoots is host of The Wheelhouse on ESPN 975 weekdays from 3 to 7 Central in Houston. So super excited to have you on, especially, like I said, in a year like this where the whole NFL world right now, in terms of draft talk, seems to be focusing on quarterbacks, like we are every year. But the Panthers and Texans seem to be the two teams that are kind of controlling the dominoes that fall, so to speak, this year. And this is kind of perfect timing because there have been rumors out lately about what the Texans may or may not be thinking about with their number 2 pick. To the surprise of many, it may not be a quarterback. So we're going to get into all that. Cody, I'm super happy to be talking to you. We all are. If this is your first time watching the show, I'm Max. I've got Lexi and Bobby with me. Two awesome football people. How you guys doing
Football
today?
people, I like it. I'm great. It's beautiful out, and happy to be home from Texas after being there all week. So that's nice. It was actually warmer here than it was down there. So I don't know how that worked out while I was gone, but it seems typical.
Yeah, I've been so wrapped up in basketball season that I completely forgot about what football is. So, and to be fair, after the Sooners went 6-7, easy to forget about the sport as a whole for a little bit.
I feel you.
Well, the Thunder are knocking on the door of the playoffs, so I don't blame you for your excitement being transitioned elsewhere. Lexi, real quick, Texas barbecue review.
Oh my gosh.
We know you had some.
It was just absolutely incredible. I jokingly told Jake, I'm like, hey, we should move down there. He's like, well, let's just go visit and see first. I'm like, okay, I mean, you didn't say no. No, but it was amazing. I walked almost 3 miles one way for Terry Black's. Worth the walk. I would do it 1,000 times, but I posted a picture. Bobby's like, don't put the sauce on there, and it's funny because I put sauce on it, and I'm like, I don't even need sauce on this. And so I started scraping it off. It was incredible. The brisket was amazing. I can't wait to have it again.
I completely agree with you about not putting the sauce on there. I didn't even I don't remember anyone telling me not to, but I remember when I went to Austin a few months ago, went to Terry Black's, and I was like, "This is delicious!" This.
Well, you could cut it with a spoon.
Don't even need.
You didn't even need it. It just fell right apart. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, it was so good."
Yeah. Hey, what's up? It's the Weekenders,
and thanks for tuning in.
Make sure to like and subscribe to see more Multiplicity Media content, like the thing you just watched. Yeah,
I've never had Carolina barbecue, so I'm gonna try to have someone. I'm down in Myrtle Beach if there's some in that area when I go in a month. And
please
compare it.
Please do, for sure.
Brisket is king in Texas for sure.
Yeah.
Cody, what's your favorite spot in Houston?
Yeah.
Oh man, Houston Truth Barbecue.
Barbecue. Okay.
Number one or number 2 on the Texas Monthly Top 50. So they do a fantastic job. And then Blood Brothers Barbecue is another joint. 3 Asian guys who grew up in part of Houston, and started pop-up barbecue, and then they have their own brick and mortar shop. It's fantastic. They do a brisket fried rice that'll knock your socks
brisket
off.
fried rice. Oh my gosh, that sounds so good.
Yes.
I heard Houston has a lot of good food. I'll have to make it down there sometime.
Oh, it's incredible. It's incredible. And then my people over at J Bar M do a great job. They're kind of like barbecue. They're one of the rare places to stay open late, so you can go get barbecue at night.
Oh boy.
So they do a fantastic job. They're kind of like a barbecue / steakhouse. And then a place called Feegis. It's spelled funny. It sounds funny. They have the best sides in the game. So, and really good barbecue. So I gotta give everybody the shout out. So I'll get spooned.
For sure.
Love to
You
hear
gotta
it.
have good sides though. Like I had a great peach cobbler and mac and cheese with mine. Oh my goodness, so good.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, love that. Super hungry now. But let's get into this draft talk. Cody, the first question I have for you is like we talked about, with the quarterbacks and just sort of your. I want to get your feel on where you see the top 4 guys landing. Of course, by top 4 I mean Bryce Young,
Sure.
C.J. Stroud, Will Levis, and Anthony Richardson. You don't have to tell me necessarily like order or whatever, but like where do you see them landing in terms of like the teams, position? Yeah.
Yeah, to me, Bryce is the top quarterback, and then there's a gap, and then there's CJ, and then there's a bigger gap, and then it's Will Levis and Anthony Richardson, and that can be adjusted however you like your quarterback. If you like the guy with a bit more mobility, or you like the guy with a bit more toughness to him, and that's going to determine how you feel about those 3. And to me, the whole time I've thought that Bryce is going to go number 1, especially if the team trades up to 1, and that's what Carolina's done. But I just can't see how Carolina's going with Bryce when at a moment, you hear the Bears talk about this, they were content to get up to 2 when the Texans were going up to 1. Like the Bears had the 1 to 2, 2 to 9 set up. And then the Texans backed out of that. And so then the Panthers were content and the Bears were content to make the move happen. Well, the Panthers are making that move to make sure they get one of the top 2 guys and the guy they want. Well, if they were comfortable with 2, with the Texans at 1, I feel like they're still Stroud. So I know that the numbers have changed in Vegas. I know that Adam Schefter's sitting on ESPN all week saying Bryce Young should be the number 1 pick. The ship sailed for Houston. I still believe they're going Stroud. I believe it's a big smokescreen to try to dupe the Texans into trading up for the number 1 pick. So I go Stroud. I go Young number 2. And then I believe the Colts are going to move up to 3 and take Will Levis. And then I believe another team's moving up to 4 to take Anthony Richardson. I believe we're going to have the first time in the history of the NFL draft have quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3, 4. I talked about this a couple months ago on my show. It didn't seem super real then. It seems more and more real now, especially with teams at 7 like Vegas, 11 like the Titans. You could see those teams jump all the way up to 4, especially if Arizona's already gotten a little bit from the Colts. It may not be as hard to jump up to where Arizona is at 4. So QB 1, 2, 3, 4. Stroud, Young, Levis, Richardson is the 1 through 4 is how I see it shaking out.
I think a lot of reporters and pundits and opinionists have sort of downplayed the quarterback class this year. I don't think it feels as bad as last year, but it doesn't feel as even with the top 2 guys, it doesn't feel like, next year with like, people are like salivating over Williams and May.
Sure.
So with that being said, like I'm not saying I disagree with the fact that these quarterbacks should go 1, 2, 3, 4, but my thought is, with the feelings towards, this class, especially Levis and Richardson, sort of being viewed as like, great talents, but maybe flawed in a lot of ways. Why do you feel like teams are so thirsty to grab like
Sure.
quarterbacks with those first 4 picks. I mean, Stroud and Bryce, I think people would understand, but Levis and Richardson are 3 and 4. Like, why do you feel like that? Like, teams are would sort of want that.
That's the way the NFL operates now. If you don't start your clock with a quarterback, then owners get unantsy with you, fans get unantsy with you, and some of these teams are set up to take that quarterback risk. We talk about the Indianapolis Colts. Well, Jim Irsay has basically said they're taking a young quarterback, and there's not really another option for them to go. Well, they've been exploring the veteran quarterbacks. It's time for them to take a swing at the young guy. And from an Anthony Richardson standpoint, think about the guys that I mentioned that could trade up for Anthony Richardson. Josh McDaniels and the Raiders, they've got Jimmy G for a year or two. So that's a time for Anthony Richardson to sit. The Tennessee Titans, they've got Ryan Tannehill for one more year. That's time for Anthony Richardson to sit and learn and develop and get ready. And I just feel like it's time for some of these teams to take that swing and to take that opportunity, especially because we have seen with, especially last year's draft, there can be some really, really lean years. Like, we're sitting here today talking about, well, Caleb Williams and Drake May are supposed to go basically 1 and 2. Well, we were saying the same thing a couple of years ago about Spencer Stradler and Sam Howell and a bunch of those quarterbacks, and that draft class fell apart. So teams know draft classes can fall apart. So even if you feel great about Caleb Williams, you feel great about Drake May, you feel great about some of these other guys that could be coming out next year, if you have an opportunity to grab a guy, and there's definitely things to like about all these guys. Like, I don't know that it's necessarily a big force job on all these guys because you can talk yourself into a positive on every single one of these quarterbacks. So it just feels like it's time for some of these teams to make that investment, take that swing. You're right, though. It's easier to understand the Texans and Panthers doing it. It's harder to understand some of these other teams, especially if you're considering it's the widely regarded number 3, number 4 quarterback in this draft.
The reports that I kind of alluded to earlier that have been out lately is that the Texans may surprise some folks. And if essentially if the Panthers take Bryce Young, the Texans may instead go for Will Anderson or just not CJ Stroud at number 2. Do you feel like that's a possibility?
Sure, it's definitely a possibility. I just feel like it's unlikely, and it's not really coming from a place of logic either. And I understand DeMeco Ryans is a defensive coach. I get that. They hired a defensive guy, and he worked with 3 number 1 draft picks on his defensive line. 3 first-round draft picks on his defensive line in Bosa, Kinlaw, and Eric Armstead. Certainly, I understand that. And everyone's like, well, look at the way San Francisco built things and their investment, and they got the defensive line. Then they went and tried to go get the quarterback. It's like, yes, to an extent, you're correct. However, Kyle Shanahan, 6 months into his tenure as the coach and decision maker in San Francisco, traded for Jimmy Garoppolo. He went out there and got a quarterback. And the 49ers won a meaningless game the year before Kyler Murray and Bosa came out. And if they hadn't won that meaningless game, I think in December, they'd have the number 1 pick, and they'd have drafted Kyler Murray. They wouldn't have drafted Baby Bosa. So this is an organization that DeMeco Ryans is coming from that's constantly evaluating and taking swings at the quarterback spot. He saw Kyle Shanahan take that swing when he first got there with Jimmy Garoppolo. He saw them then have to take the swing with Trey Lance because they felt like they topped out with Jimmy Garoppolo. And DeMeco was on the NFL Network a couple weeks ago, and he said, yeah, there's 2 really good quarterbacks in this draft that we like, and we have plenty of things to figure out when it comes to those 2 guys. I get that he would love Will Anderson. I totally understand why he would love Will Anderson. It'd be awesome if you get the QB and Will Anderson. That's just not feasible. And if it is feasible, we're playing Madden, and that trade-up is real expensive, and I just don't believe the Texans are in a position where they want to do that. So it still, to me, is definitely a quarterback at 2. If Young's off the board, I don't know that it's for sure Stroud, but it's definitely a quarterback at 2 for the Texans. I don't believe this defensive line hooey.
I have one follow-up to that, and I'll let Lexi or Bobby go next. You talk to, being on the radio, I'm sure you hear from a lot of fans, on the radio and social media. I'm curious about the perspective of the Houston Texans fan base. Like, how are they feeling in terms of the direction that the team, should go with that pick?
We're all still mad about Week 18, where they beat the dang Colts. That's most of us are still mad about that. It's mostly Young as the preference, followed by Stroud, followed by gotta have a quarterback, doesn't matter who it is, followed by then let's draft a defensive lineman. So most Texans fans are very much in gotta get that quarterback, and then their preference levels are Young, Stroud, and then basically everything else after that. So the fan base is still very much get the QB at 2. Wish we had 1, but get the QB at 2, regardless of who's there.
Yeah, Cody, my wife is actually she's from Cyprus, so she's a massive Texans fan. Needless to say, Sundays in our house have not been great the past couple years. I just want to know overall, not just from the draft perspective, how is this thing going to get turned around? And is this year going to be better off than the past couple ones? Obviously, getting rid of Jack Easterby, kind of getting some of that toxicity out of the organization has been good, but are they going to show some improvement this season?
It feels like the Texans are headed in a little bit different direction. They got the number 1 coach on the market. DeMeco Ryans is the only guy that every team wanted to talk to in this coaching cycle, and he only really talked with the Texans and the Broncos, and he ended up with the Houston Texans. That's something that doesn't happen to the Texans very often. They don't get a lot of football luck head their way and turn their way. So that was a great aspect of hopefully this thing is getting turned around, and you sort of feeling good about this offseason. I started calling it the era of good vibes with the Houston Texans. And then this week, the rumors pop up that the GM may not be happy and he may split after the draft. So there's always something with this organization. So here's how it works. You get a little lucky in the draft where Carolina still takes C.J. Stroud. You get Bryce Young. That's one of the biggest elements of turning this thing around. You do something awesome at 12, and you put together with the other 10 picks a really nice draft class. I don't know if that's moving around. I don't know if that's making all 10 picks. And then you really try to hit the ground running here in 2023 with DeMeco and Bryce and a young, exciting offensive coaching staff running an offense that works in the NFL and actually operates well across the NFL, unlike the Patriots offenses they used to run. And that's what the Texans need to get things going. Now, of course, they make all the draft picks, and the Monday after the draft, the GM quits or they fire him. It's chaos, and it's same old Texans, and when is it ever going to change? Never. That's what happens. But you gotta. It's not even threading a needle. Like, you've got a wide gap that you can go through towards the path of relevancy. They just got to go through it.
For sure.
That's true. I gotta say, every single Houston team just can't be normal. Even the one that's good, bunch of drama all the time. So
Yeah.
I gotta say, I'm sure it's a pretty interesting gig, doing radio down there.
There is no normalcy to the general manager position in this town. It is ridiculous. They fired the general manager after they won the World Series of the baseball team. The general manager for the basketball team is not even a GM. He's a lawyer. And then the GM that used to be here got stabbed in the back by a preacher and the head coach, and then they let the preacher run the team for a couple of years.
Oh my gosh.
And then they let him try to get his buddy Nick Caserio in there, and it's just like, just be normal. Just be like a tiny bit normal. Thank goodness we have a little bit of normalcy now with the Astros general manager. He's not going anywhere, you would think. But yeah, nothing's been normal from a general manager perspective in this city.
Well, and then your college football head coach is Dana Holgerson, so there you go.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
For sure. Well, as someone who struggled with general managers all in the past, I can say it does feel good to finally get a breakthrough as a Lions fan in Brad Holmes. So, hopefully you guys can get that going for yourselves. But so I wanted to ask, what team do you think is really set up best for this draft? Coming off free agency and going into what picks they have and such.
So it's the two teams that have the 2 first-round picks that aren't the Texans. To me, it's the Seahawks and it's the Lions. The Seahawks one is interesting because they're in a weird fluctuation of, do we use both picks for now and try to help a team that made the playoffs, Or do we kind of half-step, use a pick to help the team now, and then use a pick to help the team maybe in the future, like Hendon Hooker at 20, something like that, to kind of have that quarterback after Geno Smith. So they're in a weird spot, and you would think, especially if QBs go 1, 2, 3, 4, you would think that they're going to have the first crack at anything they want at number 5. So is that Jalen Carter? Well, we know they took Frank Clark all those years ago, and we're comfortable with some of the off-the-field stuff that he had. And what Frank Clark dealt with was far more serious than what Jalen Carter dealt with. So is it Jalen Carter? Is it Will Anderson? Is it Tyree Wilson, the Texas Tech kid? Is it a trade back because somebody wants one of those guys that we just talked about? So the Seahawks have sort of a unique, fun spot. My gut tells me that would be between Will Anderson and Jalen Carter. And then at that point, it's the Lions, and it's like, okay, well, what are they doing? Are they pairing an edge rusher with Aiden Hutchinson? Are they getting an interior guy? Do they want to get the best corner in the draft? Kind of how do the Lions do that? And then those two teams swing back around again in that middle of the first round, and it's like, okay, based on what they did with that first pick, are they going offense? Are they going with a luxury selection? Like I saw a mock draft the other day where the Lions get Will Anderson and Bijan Robinson in the first round.
If that happens, I'll sell my soul of Brett Holmes.
Yeah, it's like throw a Detroit style pizza party for the whole city.
Deep dish, baby. Let's go.
Because if you put Will Anderson and Aiden Hutchinson on the same team, you're going to terrorize
Oh
quarterbacks.
God, it's going.
And then that offense is going to be Amon-Ra St. Brown, Bijan, and Jamison Williams, who was my favorite wide receiver in last year's draft. That's a freaky offense. So to me, those first two teams that you don't feel like have to have the quarterback, they sort of control the draft. Oh, and they also have that second first round pick. So that to me is where it gets really, really interesting. Obviously, the Texans could sort of throw everything into chaos at 2, but I believe I believe it's all smoke and they're taking a QB. So at that point, it's Seattle and it's Detroit. I like what both their off seasons were. If I was Seattle, I'd probably be kicking myself that I signed Geno and a day later I found out Lamar's available. So that's not ideal. But Detroit's had a fantastic offseason. They kept their coach as the offensive, or they kept their offensive coordinator, which is great for them. Some really shrewd signings. I wasn't the biggest Dan Campbell fan starting last season, but he put together a good team, good squad, and they're set up, man. They got an opportunity to add some ass kickers in this league.
Love to hear it. Who do you think is going to end up being the best, defensive player in this draft? I feel like there's kind of a lot of talent here, and I know Will Anderson's kind of like the go-to, but is there anyone besides that you think is going to really be great?
So I'm worried about Jalen Carter from a between the ears perspective. Just all the stuff he's gone through. How's he going to handle this? As he gets further and further away from it, maybe it's less and less of a worry. I just don't like interior defensive linemen that much. Look, I know Aaron Donald's fantastic, but I'd take Myles Garrett instead of Aaron Donald. I just like edge rushers. I'll figure it out with my interior guys. It's tough to go away from Will Anderson. I'm not in love with these corners. So I really don't see how one of those guys turned into one of the best players a la Sauce last year. But even then, I liked Aiden Hutchinson's season as much as I like Sauce. So I'm partial to the edge rushers. So Will Anderson's got the high floor and the high ceiling combination, whereas my guy Tyree Wilson out of Texas Tech, he's got the low floor, high ceiling. Like there's draft evaluators that believe Tyree Wilson could be better than Will Anderson. You just need to get him there to make that happen. So I would go between those two guys. It feels like a lot more loaded towards the top on, hey, who's the best defender? If you ask me who the best offensive player in this draft is, not a quarterback, I mean, there could be 4 or 5 different answers for me. So, but the defenders feel kind of stacked towards the top, but it's Will Anderson for me. He's just so freaky. He can put his hand in the ground. He can stand up and rush. Yeah,
I really hope Detroit takes him. That would be so great.
Yeah, he's going to be a real.
He's a monster for sure.
Yep.
I want to circle back real quick to the quarterback discussion, because there is a lot of debate over just like Stroud versus Young in general, and who they could be in the NFL. I know you said you kind of had Stroud at the top. I mean Young, excuse me, at the top of your rankings when we talked about it earlier. But as I know how much you know the game of college football, so I do want to kind of get your opinion on how you compared them,
Sure.
sort of in the college level, and then how you think how you think their traits will translate to the NFL. Like, why should fans be sort of excited about Young versus Stroud or Stroud versus Young, or however you see it?
So Stroud and Young, to me, you can absolutely win with both guys. You just win in different ways and at different paces. So with Young, I believe you win more and you win earlier. And with Stroud, you can certainly win a lot. Like, could I see C.J. Stroud being a championship quarterback in the NFL? Yes, I can see it. He was going to win the championship in college if his kicker could have hit that kick. They would have smashed TCU in the national championship. That idiot kicker missed the kick. Like, C.J. Stroud played one of the best games of his life. The thing about Stroud is he's so pocket-centric that I just wonder about his ability. When you look at the super successful quarterbacks in the NFL right now, a lot of the pocket-centric guys are old guys that have years and years and years and years and years of seeing this. And a lot of the young guys that are successful really early on and often, they got a lot more mobility to them than what CJ consistently has shown. Now, if he's Georgia CJ Stroud, he's every bit as good as Bryce Young. But I just don't know that he's Georgia C.J. Stroud every single game. So with that aspect, that's what I would worry about a little bit with C.J. is, can you win with an elite pocket passer? Absolutely, you can win with an elite pocket passer. I'd be silly to sit here and tell you can't. But with Bryce, he's a fantastic processor. Todd McShay cannot stop gushing about how quickly Bryce Young makes decisions and makes the correct decision. He's got that little bit of mobility to move the pocket or move the play where he needs to go. He's got that ability to use his legs a la Mahomes, which is it's not a go-to tool, but it's like an emergency. I can scramble for 10 yards if I need it. And it just feels like he, between the ears, what he cares about at the next level, how he's been coached his entire life, it just feels like he is the day one maximize everything you get type of guy. And of course, that all goes by the wayside if a 400-pound defensive lineman falls on him and he breaks in half. But I'm not going to sit here and act like Bryce Young's durability is a big issue when Will Levis played an entire season hurt and it drastically affected him. And Anthony Richardson last year got hurt dancing. He had to miss a game because he got hurt dancing. He had a concussion as well last year too. So, C.J. Stroud's the most durable guy. He also played, when you factor in how good his offensive line was and how regularly tough the defenses are, like that he had the best setup for that. He's got two guys that are going to be day one and day two tackles. He's got a center that's going to be a day two center. He's got some other guys that eventually are going to be in the league that were on that offensive line. And he plays 4 tough defenses a year. So it's like, yeah, of course his durability was better. Nobody touched him. The thing I worry about with Stroud is pressure. And it's like, well, his numbers against pressure aren't good compared to the other guys. Nobody's numbers against pressure are good. Like, I don't worry about my guy's numbers against pressure. That's planning to fail. Like, I'll just keep him clean. And when you keep him clean, Stroud can make every throw. He can make every play. He's got the arm. He can make decisions. A lot of conversations about his footwork this week, how he's always ready to throw. So this processing test that people have been talking about, it's called this S2 cognition test, this test where they say, oh, how quickly you process information and this and that. Hooey. I don't care about that. When the guy sees a guy open, he throws it to him, and he makes big plays, and he's done it for 2 straight years against a really tough level of competition in the Big Ten. I like Stroud. I love Young, and that's where I'm at with those two guys. You can win with both of them.
I'll admit I'm definitely one of the ones that is worried about Bryce Young's frame because he's short and he's slight, like in build, like that worries me. Like Drew Brees is a like built. He's a thicker guy.
He's thick.
Some of these other guys, like like they're like even Caleb Williams, like short, but he's a thicker dude. Like Bryce Young is skinny, but I will admit that I was listening to Luke Kuechly talk about playing Drew Brees back in the day, and one thing he mentioned was Drew would always get the ball out quickly, and he never took like really like clean hits. He was always kind of like moving around, and so to that point about the mobility aspect and the processing with Young, like that made me feel a little bit better about him, because it's like, all right, it's true that he's accurate, he makes quick decisions, and he's really mobile. So you think you're worried about the frame, but it's not like he's a statue in the pocket that's going to be always taking hits. He's a smart kid. Like that may not be as big of an issue as we think it is. So I think those are great points. Real quick, I know you got to bounce in a few minutes, Stoots, but I wanted to ask you, give me one player in this class that you think is being a little bit overrated, and one player that's underrated.
Ooh, okay. So this one's tough because to me it feels like you can find sort of whatever range you want with some of these top guys. And it's like, oh, okay, like I can figure out what I can find somebody that's going to give me something good on one of the top guys, and I can find somebody that's going to give me something bad on one of the top guys. So you've got kind of like a nice wide range with them. I can't quite figure out Nolan Smith, the edge from Georgia. I've seen the Texans taking him at 12 in a couple of mock drafts, and I'm having a hard time with him because he is not a defensive end. He's an outside linebacker / pass rusher, but he's also an athletic freak. So it's like, can you use him as a do-it-all type player? But he clearly needs to rush the passer. He had the best pressure rate in college last year. And pressure rate is the best predictor of future pass rush success. So I can't figure him out. Sometimes I feel like he's overrated when I see him in the top 10. And then sometimes I see him going in the 20s and I feel like he's underrated. It's like he's the one for me. It's just for the Texans, it's a stay away from me at 12. But I could absolutely see where he goes ahead of where the Texans pick, and I could absolutely see where he goes behind where the Texans pick. So I'm going to call him slightly overrated, but also slightly underrated based on which team might be interested in him. Because a 3-4 team, they're going to get a monster. A 4-3 team, they're going to get a guy that kind of has to play linebacker, kind of gets to rush the passer. So I think he's sort of my tweener. He's my double up. Quentin Johnston's terribly overrated. The wide receiver from TCU. It's tough for me to see how he compares to some of the other top wide receivers that have come off the board in the first round the past few seasons. I would take almost every first rounder last year instead of him. I would take Jackson Smith and Jigba this year instead of him. I would take Zay Flowers this year instead of him. But there's a little bit of like people coming around on Quentin Johnston because his wide receiver coach has been out there doing some good PR for him about, hey, don't worry about him being a body catcher. Like, okay, I'm worried about him just dropping the ball. Like, how about we just don't drop the ball when you're a big freaky athlete at wide receiver? So I'm going to go with him as my overrated, and I'm either going to be 100% right on this guy, or it's going to be I'm going to look like the biggest dummy in the entire world on this guy. But Arkansas linebacker Drew Sanders. Drew Sanders is rated as one of the best prospects on NFL.com. He's one of the 10 best prospects on NFL.com. Lance Zierlein, who does almost all their rankings, works in the building with me. He does the morning show at the radio station. Lance loves this guy. The versatility, the athleticism, he's an inside linebacker, he's an outside linebacker, he's a pass rusher, he can stand up and rush the passer, he can put his hand in the ground, rush the passer. This guy's going in the second round because he only has 1 year of success at Arkansas. He's a former 5-star that Nick Saban recruited. Like, the guy's a freak. So I love Drew Sanders. I feel like he is totally underrated. He's a guy that when the mock draft season started, he was going in the top 10. Now he's going in the 40s. And someone's going to get Drew Sanders, and they're either going to get a guy that can't play a lick of football, or they're going to get a stud, and we're all going to look around at each other and be like, how'd that guy get to 40? So that's my guy that's underrated.
Yep.
And then Bijan's underrated too, because everyone's like, he's a running back. He's a freak.
Yep.
He's the best running back in the draft by a wide margin, and he'll be a top 10 running back in the league day one. He's Christian McCaffrey. He is Christian McCaffrey made over. And I believe in Bijan. And if I've already told all our listeners here in Houston, if the Texans draft Bryce Young at 2 and Bijan Robinson at 12, I'm throwing a pizza party. I'm inviting all of Houston.
Oh.
And we'll have a pizza party, like we're all 12 again.
Imagine that backfield though, with Pierce, Singletary, and Bijan.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Monster.
Yeah, and Bijan helps you so much from Bijan. If he just played slot wide receiver, he'd be a 3rd-round pick. Like, he's that good at catching the football. Not to mention that, like, I heard somebody say the other day, like, he could be Debo with like more running back than wide receiver, and I was like, I'll take it.
Yeah,
It's a pretty good.
I'll take it.
I could see it. Yeah, Bijan, unbelievable player. I know it all too well.
Yeah, you know Cedar fan.
I know all too well how good Bijan Robinson is. That guy, look, if he stays healthy, he's going to have just an unreal career in the NFL.
Awesome. Yeah, go ahead.
I just look running backs and like players in general. I think we have to look at players in 5-6 year windows now. That's how long guys are on teams. And if they're not a quarterback or they're not the best pass rusher in football, that's how long guys are on teams.
Mm-hmm.
Kansas City fans never thought Tyreek Hill was leaving. Tyreek Hill's on the Dolphins now. Titans fans never thought A.J. Brown was leaving. A.J. Brown's on the Eagles now. Like, guys play for your team for 5 and 6 years and then they move on. Like, okay, you're going to tell me for 5 or 6 years I have the best running back or one of the best running backs in football? I'll take it. I'll take it with Bijan Robinson. I'll take that swing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not the NFL that I grew up with, where like receivers like Steve Smith and Jerry Rice were staying on teams
Forever.
Yeah.
There's a lot of the skill position guys, especially, are out of there after a few years, after their first or second contract. So, awesome, Stoots. Thank you so much for this. I really appreciate it. We so happy to have you. We're looking forward to the draft in a couple of weeks. It's going to be fun. And we'll definitely have to have you back, especially when college football gets underway, because we know how much you can talk about college football. So,
Yep. All right, my big prediction. I'll leave you with this.
Yes, please.
I say Stroud goes 1, Young goes 2, and I say that is a Thursday night football matchup on Amazon this season in Carolina because the Texans go play the Panthers. Yeah. I say that is how Amazon makes those two teams interesting on Thursday night.
That'll be a good matchup.
100%. Yeah, 100%. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Stoots. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
We'll let you get on the radio.
Sounds good.
Have a good one.
Talk to you soon.
Good
Good to see you.